Welcome back, episode 4 of the Wantrepreneur series. This one's about finding your why and the 4 C's framework. Last episode, we talked about getting clear on the problem that you're solving. We went deep on why problem clarity matters and how to discover real problems and also how to test whether they're actually worth solving. So that's like our foundation, understanding what we're building and for whom. But the next step is knowing the problem is actually not enough. You can have perfect clarity on what needs fixing. You can have validated demand. You can have a brilliant solution mapped out. And unfortunately, you can still fail. Because if you don't know why you care about solving this problem, you won't last. You'll quit when it gets hard. And it will get hard. So this episode is about finding your why. Not the problem, not the market opportunity, your personal motivation. The thing that gets you out of bed in the morning when the business is bleeding cash. The thing that keeps you going when everyone else thinks that you've gone mad. I'm going to introduce to you a framework I've developed called the 4 C's. Circumstance, curiosity, contribution, and commitment. These are the 4 ways that founders find and maintain their motivation. That's a mouthful. Some start with one and develop the others. Some have all 4 from day one. But understanding which C's drive you is essential to building something that will last. So let's dive in. Circumstance, the first C. When your back is against the wall. This is when external pressures or crises catalyze you into action. You're out of options. Desperation becomes fuel. Now, one of my favourite examples of this is Sir Peter Beck. He's a legend in New Zealand and also in the space industry. Like most successful founders, his journey was anything but easy. Peter decided to sidestep university. He had an enthusiasm that was a passion bordering on an insanity for rocketry. He began tinkering in his backyard, launching rockets of ever-increasing scale. And he was actually succeeding. His ultimate dream was really to get rockets into space. And at that time, the only possible way to do it was to work for one of the dominant players. So Sir Peter, not a sir at that stage, packed his bags and ventured to the USA. Somehow, he managed to talk his way into meetings with the key players, NASA, Lockheed Martin, Boeing, anyone who he thought could hire him. But he had no credentials, and he had no money, and he had no corporate experience. And at this stage, SpaceX was still really early days of its development. NASA was all but wound down. And bear in mind, when people want to refer to someone who is fanatically smart, the reference is usually rocket scientist. So fighting gravity, the atmosphere, radiation, and investors is clearly incredibly complex. They want you to grasp super complex concepts, and the hirers will want a master's degree at minimum, PhD by preference. Peter had none of that. All he had was a dream and deep, deep determination. So reading this, watching this, you'll be unsurprised to hear that he wasn't hired. This wonderful story can be viewed in the documentary Wild, Wild Space. It's a great caper. So Peter recounts sitting on the aircraft en route home back to New Zealand with shattered dreams. He alludes to something which is clearly flirting with depression. Who would blame him? His dreams were shattered. Then, interviewed many years later, looking down the barrel, he says, literally, the only logical conclusion was, fuck it, let's start a company. Now, we're not talking about an e-commerce drop shipping thing here. A rocketry startup was what he was talking about. Outside of a cure for cancer, there's not really too much else that could be harder. Since that fateful time, Rocket Lab has launched dozens of successful missions, and their mission now is to plan to get people back to the moon. Be careful of the person who's left with no other options. Desperation is a powerful motivator. Sir Peter had that in spades. So circumstance forces action. It's the burning platform. The moment when doing nothing is more painful than doing something terrifying. Not everyone starts this way, but those who do often have a ferocity that's hard to match. Hi, it's Josh. Thanks for listening to the show. When founders talk about the dream exit, they're really talking about freedom. Freedom to choose how to use their time and to decide what comes next. As a client of JB Ware in New Zealand, I know this is what sets them apart. They help entrepreneurs and leaders turn success into significance. A great exit isn't just about the commas in your bank account. It's about what those commas allow you to create. Two Commas is proudly partnered with JB Ware, helping founders by putting their wealth to work for generations. The second C, curiosity. This is the internal drive to experiment, to solve problems, and to ask, what if, over and over and over until you find an answer. Unlike number one, it's not desperation, it's fascination. Now, we all know we can thank Thomas Edison for his invention of the light bulb. But do you know that the reason you're able to listen to recorded music today is directly traceable back to his invention of the phonograph? Let me play that back for you. Edison stumbled onto the phonograph while working on something completely different. This was a pattern behind a lot of his inventions. In 1877, he was trying to improve the telephone for Western Union, and he was thinking about the telephone as a form of telegraph. He even called it a speaking telegraph. While experimenting with some bits and pieces, he had a revelation. There's no doubt that I shall be able to store up and reproduce automatically at a future time the human voice perfectly. So that was recording the human voice essentially and playing it back over again. This wasn't the problem he'd set out to solve in the first place, but he was deeply curious about telephone messages, and that curiosity led him sideways into something nobody had done before, capturing and playing back sound. He sketched a device he labelled the phonograph and sent it to his machinist, John Crucy. 30 hours later, Crucy had developed the first prototype. Edison wrapped tinfoil around a metal cylinder, turned a crank, and then shouted into a cone attached to a thin diaphragm and needle. The sound waves vibrated the diaphragm, which moved the needle up and down, making dents in the tinfoil. Then he played it back. Mary had a little lamb, the recording began. Its fleece was white as snow. It was the first time in history that the human voice had been captured and replayed. Edison then took his invention to the offices of Scientific American in New York and demonstrated it. The December 1877 issue reported, Mr. Thomas A. Edison recently came into this office, placed the little machine on our desk, turned a crank, and the machine inquired as to our health, asked how we liked the phonograph, and informed us that it was very good, and bid us a cordial good night. Now, if you know something about Thomas Edison, you'll know that he was relentless. So naturally, he didn't stop there. He became fascinated with what the phonograph could do. In 1878, he published a list of possible future uses. Letter writing without a stenographer, phonographic books for the blind, teaching elocution, reproducing music, clocks that announce the time, and so on. Most of these applications, however, didn't work immediately. The tinfoil recordings had poor fidelity and deteriorated after a single playback. Edison set the phonograph aside to work on the light bulb, but when he came back to it years later, experimenting with wax cylinders, different materials, he improved the designs. He was relentlessly curious about making it work better. Now that's curiosity in its purest form. Edison wasn't solving a crisis. He wasn't responding to market demand. He stumbled sideways often from one experiment into another because he was fascinated by the question, what if we could capture sound? And once he had the answer, he kept asking, what else could this do? Innovation is the product of curiosity. It's the tireless asking of questions. There must be a better way. How can we make this faster? How do we get people to actually use this? And who can help me bring this vision to life? If you're driven by curiosity, you're in it for the process, not just the outcome. You want to understand. You want to figure it out. And that fascination can sustain you through years of uncertainty. Just make sure you have the finances to support this quest. The third C is contribution. This is the desire for legacy, for social impact, for something deeper than personal gain. It's the recognition that your work can and should matter beyond your bank account. Yvon Chouinard, founder of Patagonia, is the embodiment of this. In his book, Let My People Go Surfing, Chouinard writes something that stuck with me. I've been a businessman for almost 50 years. And that's as difficult for me to say those words as it is for someone to admit being an alcoholic or a lawyer. That's not false modesty. Chouinard never wanted to be a businessman. He was a climber, an environmentalist, and an reluctant entrepreneur who started making climbing gear in the late 1950s because the equipment available just wasn't good enough. His tinkering led to an improved ice axe that became the basis for modern ice axe design. He produced his first mail order catalogue in 1964, which was just a one-page photograph sheet containing advice not to expect fast delivery during climbing season. Patagonia grew, but not because Chouinard wanted to build an empire. It grew because he cared deeply about two things: making the best product and protecting the environment. By the early 1990s, Patagonia faced a crisis. They'd grown rapidly, taken on debt, and were forced to rethink their priorities. Chouinard, in true form, took a dozen of his top managers to Argentina and to the windswept mountains of Patagonia for a bit of a walkabout. In the course of roaming around these wild lands, they asked themselves, why are we in business? And what kind of business do we want to build from here? When they returned, they struggled to put their mission into words. But one of their board members, author and ecologist Jerry Mander, skipped a lunch at a board meeting and went off by himself. He returned with a perfectly crafted statement that outlined an ecology of values that can mitigate the environmental and social crisis of our time. Heady words. Those words became the basis for Patagonia's mission statement, which is make the best product, cause no unnecessary harm, and use business to inspire and implement solutions to the environmental crisis. Now, that's not just marketing speak. That's genuine contribution. Chouinard started the 1% for the Planet in 2001, which was an alliance of businesses that contribute at least 1% of their net annual sales, not profit, but sales, to environmental organisations. Patagonia now invests heavily in regenerative agriculture, creates plant-based wetsuits, runs a food business focused on sustainability, and operates a venture fund to support like-minded companies. Chouinard then wrote, all the work we do at Patagonia to be a more responsible company is for naught unless we can become part of the solution to this problem. And as David Brower, the late environmentalist, put it, there's no business to be done on a dead planet. Now, fast forward from 2001 to September 2022, and Chouinard did something extraordinary. He gave the entire company away. He didn't sell it, he gave it away. He transferred all the voting stock, worth about $3 billion, to a trust designed to ensure Patagonia's values remain intact into the future. So now, every dollar of profit that Patagonia makes, roughly $100 million a year, goes directly towards protecting the planet. Chouinard and his family walked away from the literal billions of net worth to ensure the company's contribution outlasts them. In his announcement, he wrote, "Earth is now our only shareholder. I never wanted to be a businessman. I started as a craftsman making climbing gear for my friends and myself, and then got into apparel. As we began to witness the extent of global warming and as we began to witness the extent of global warming and ecological destruction, we doubled down on our commitment to saving our home planet. This is contribution at its most profound. It's the recognition that your business can be a force for good. It's building something that matters beyond just profit. It's legacy work taken to its ultimate conclusion, giving away everything to ensure the mission continues. Now, not every founder is driven by contribution from day one, but those who are tend to build businesses with deep roots and loyal followings. And when you're willing to give it all away to protect what matters most, that will literally change the world. The fourth C is commitment. Now, this is different from circumstance, curiosity, and contribution, which are all ignition points. They are what get you started. But commitment is what keeps you going. It's the grit, the perseverance, the stubborn refusal to quit when things get hard. And as I've mentioned, they will get hard. Psychologists have been studying success for quite some time now, and what they've discovered is fascinating. It's not intelligence that predicts success. It's not luck, although that does help. It's not even being really, really good looking. It's grit. It's perseverance. It's the ability to keep going when everyone else has given up. Research by Angela Duckworth on grit and Carol Dweck on growth mindset consistently shows that talent is overrated. What matters is sustained effort over time, the willingness to fail, learn, and try again. Ordinarily, this kind of grit comes from some form of lived hardship. People who have been through adversity tend to have developed resilience. Almost every entrepreneur I know has experienced some form of hardship, varying levels and different shapes. In my circle, I see childhood trauma, surviving major illnesses, growing up in extreme poverty, immigration struggles, the death of a parent when young, financial ruin, or discrimination that forces you to fight twice as hard for half as much. These experiences tend to forge something in people. They teach you that survival is possible, that you can endure far more than you thought you could, and that when your back's against the wall, you will find a way. Now, I don't know if you've noticed, but it's startlingly easy to start things that require massive commitments to keep going. Getting married, well, you can do that in Vegas on a weekend. Having a baby, 9 months, ready or not, here it comes. Starting a business, well, you can register a company online in less than 20 minutes. To all of these things, the barrier to entry is startlingly low. The ceremony is exciting, everyone celebrates with you, you're full of optimism and energy, and the belief that this time, hopefully, it will be different. And then reality sets in. Marriage is hard when you're arguing about money at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday. Parenting gets hard when you haven't slept in 3 days and the baby won't stop crying. And businesses get hard when you're 6 weeks from running out of cash and your best employee just quit. That's when commitment matters. Not at the wedding, not at the hospital, not at the company launch party, but on the Tuesday, 6 months in, when nobody's watching you and you're tired and scared and wondering what the hell you were thinking in the first place. Now, if you're sitting there thinking, I don't want to talk about it, oh shit, I just want this year to be over, or something else entirely, don't worry, I'm not going to go get all woo-woo on you and start unpacking your trauma. Let me instead offer you some practical suggestions. Here's 3 ideas to find and maintain your commitment. First, the sunk cost reversal. Most people fall victim to the sunk cost fallacy or bias. They keep going because they've invested so much already. And that, as we all know, is backwards. Instead, try the same method, but ask yourself every quarter, if I were starting today, knowing what I know now, would I choose this? If yes, you're genuinely committed. If no, you may need to pivot or even quit. This quarterly recommitment keeps you honest. Second, there's the rocking chair moment. Imagine yourself at 80 years old, sitting in a rocking chair, looking back at your life. Would you regret quitting now? Will you regret not trying harder? That future perspective can be incredibly clarifying. Sometimes the fear of regret is more powerful than the fear of failure. Third, reflection and journaling. I'll spend most time here. The Stoics understood something fundamental about human nature. Socrates said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." Seneca took it further, writing letters to himself daily, examining his actions, his progress, and his failures. This wasn't navel-gazing, it was strategic self-awareness development. Track your progress, document your wins and your struggles. If you want to quit, go back and review what you've built, the 200 small wins you've accumulated, the problems you've solved, the customers you've served. Seeing the cumulative progress can reignite commitment when motivation wanes. And often I've found it's easy to forget how far you've come when you're staring at how far you have to go. A journal gives you perspective. It reminds you that 6 months ago you didn't have that customer, that team member, or that product feature. You built it, one decision, one day at a time. Commitment is what separates the people who make it from the people who just give up. Anyone can start, but not everyone stays. So how do these 4 C's work together? And you might be thinking, I don't have any of these C's. Am I doomed? No, luckily, you're not doomed. But it would help if you were honest with yourself. If you're not driven by circumstance, you're not naturally curious, and you don't care about contribution, why are you actually doing this? What's pulling you forward? If the answer is, I thought it would be easy money, you're probably going to be in for quite a rough ride. But the good news is, these aren't fixed traits. You can just develop them. You can cultivate curiosity by reading more broadly and leading into ideologies that you may disagree with, or just asking better questions. You can find contribution by connecting your work to something larger, a true purpose, and I'll discuss that more in future. You can build commitment through the practices I've just outlined. Now, you also might be sitting there thinking, this is all just a bit soft. I'm here to build a business, not have therapy. Why does my personal motivation matter if I'm solving a real problem? This may sound a little brutal, but the market doesn't care about you. Customers don't care if you're tired or broke or scared. And investors don't care if you're having an existential crisis. The only person who can keep you going when everything falls apart is you. And if you don't know why you're in this fight, you probably won't last. Some of you are thinking, these C's overlap too much. Isn't curiosity just another form of commitment? Doesn't circumstance create commitment? Yeah, of course, they definitely overlap. Of course they do. Life in reality isn't tidy and black and white. It's a bit messy and unpredictable. But a desperate situation, circumstance, can absolutely fuel curiosity about solutions. Curiosity without commitment dies the first time you hit a wall. Contribution can emerge from circumstance when you realise the problem is everyone's problem. But they're distinct enough to matter. Circumstance is what pushes you into the arena. Curiosity is what keeps you experimenting when the obvious answers don't work. And contribution is what connects your work to something bigger than just your bank account. And lastly, commitment is what keeps you showing up on the days when none of those other 3 things are enough. The point isn't to slot yourself neatly into one box. The point is to understand what's driving you right now so that you can recognize when that fuel runs low and you need to tap into a different source. And finally, you might be thinking, my motivation has changed over time. I started with circumstance, but now it's about contribution. Does that mean something's wrong? No, nothing's wrong. Motivations evolve. It's completely normal. What matters is that you stay connected to your why. When your circumstances change, and they will, you need something else to sustain you. Maybe that's curiosity, maybe it's contribution, maybe it's the commitment you've built through years of showing up. A quick nod to other frameworks. You might have heard of Alex Hormozi's 3 Ps: problem, passion, purpose. I like his thinking. It's clean and memorable. Problem is something's broken, you need to fix it. Passion is you're obsessed and can't stop thinking about it. And purpose, as we've discussed, is bigger mission, impact beyond yourself. Look, both frameworks are useful. Use whichever resonates with you. The point is not to memorize categories, it's to understand what drives you so that you can harness it. So let me bring this home. The 4 Cs, circumstance, curiosity, contribution, and commitment, are a map to understanding your motivation. They're not a checklist. They're not a prescription. They're a framework to help you reflect on why you're doing this. So Peter Beck was driven by circumstance and curiosity. Rejection forced him to start, but fascination with rockets kept him going. Thomas Edison was pure curiosity. He was in love with the process of discovery. Yvon Chouinard was driven by contribution. He wanted to prove business could be a force for good. And all of them had commitment, the grit to keep going when everyone else would have probably quit. Your combination will be unique. Maybe you're driven by all 4. Maybe you're strong in one and developing the others. And maybe your motivations will shift over time. That's okay. What matters most is that you know what drives you and that you stay connected to it. Because when things get hard, as I've said, they will get hard, your motivation is often all you've got. Customers will churn, investors will doubt you, team members will leave, the market will shift, your product may even break. And in those moments, if you don't know why you're doing this, you'll probably quit. But when you're clear on your why, you'll find a way forward, you'll adapt, you'll energize, and you'll keep going. So here's what I want you to do. Take some time this week to reflect on your 4 Cs. Ask yourself, what's your desperate mission? Is there a circumstance pushing you forward? What problem or opportunity are you deeply curious about? And what fascinates you enough to explore it for years? What legacy or contribution do you want your venture to make? And what could impact beyond profit? Lastly, how will you find commitment in dark times? What will you do to maintain that commitment when the motivation fades? Write it all down, talk it through with a co-founder, a mentor, or a coach. Get clear on your why, because once you know it, everything else gets easier. Decision-making gets clearer, resilience gets stronger, the path forward becomes visible, even in the dark. In my next solo episode, we'll continue building on this foundation. But for now, sit with these questions, find your 4 Cs, and connect to your why. Sharing from my own experience, when our motivation is clear and authentic, those inevitable challenges simply become fuel for our rocket. Thanks so much for listening to the show. Your ears are really important to me. If you haven't already, why not check out joshcomrie.com. There's a bunch of free resources on there, a downloadable chapter of my upcoming book, 2 commas, a diagnostic to help you understand where your business may be at in relation to your exit journey. And why not feel free to drop me an email with any feedback that you could have. Any way I and any of us can improve is through feedback. Thanks again for listening.